We have on the program Sally Wade, who was George Carlin's spouse without papers. That's the description here, but she was the love of his life. Their unique courtship is described and illustrated in the George Carlin Letters. This is a beautifully put together book, the George Carlin Letters, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade, and it's out now from Simon & Schuster. I was looking at it the other day in Barnes & Noble. I watched two people buy it at Barnes & Noble in Bourbonnais yesterday. So that's a good sign, huh, Sally?
Yeah, it is.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Large book, done in kind of a scrapbook, diary style. It's really a nice keepsake for Carlin fans.
Yeah, it's sort of a segmented, funny take on our life.
Right.
I kind of fashioned it after, a brain-dropping style book in the way that he writes.
Now, how did you first meet George Carlin?
I met George in a bookstore. My dog, Spot, introduced us, and on the first date, I tell people I was hoping he'd be a one-night stand, but he showed up with a toaster oven in one hand and an extra pair of socks in the other.
What else does a guy need to say, I'm moving in, and here we go?
Yeah, exactly. so he, his mind was lightning fast.
Your dog Spot introduced you. How does that work out?
Well, Spot walked. I told myself that if George bent down to pet Spot, that was a good sign, and I'd say hello. But otherwise, I was just going to, I wasn't going to bother him, because there are a lot of celebrities in California, and we just kind of leave them alone. So right then, Spot ran up to George, and George bent down and pet him, and
the rest was the history. Now,
yeah, I mean, Spot thinks the book's about him, of course, but then he's only read his chapter.
Right.
But there's a language chapter, and there's a wordplay chapter, lewd chapter, not real lewd, but somewhat.
Right.
Chapter about performing, and there's another one about how I compared George to my mother, who is the daughter of a Baptist minister who's never tasted alcohol in her life. They actually had a lot in common, but
right,
which was embarrassing me.
Right.
But when they were together.
Well, here is George Carlin, who spent enormous amounts of time honing his words, perfecting the syntax, the delivery, the cadence of everything he did on stage. And if you read this book, the George Carlin Letters, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade, there seems to be a very spontaneous and uninhibited approach to writing. He was...
Oh, absolutely. When we were... Well, he was as funny in the relationship as he was on stage, if not funnier, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And we were seriously funny together, because I'm a comedy writer, and I've done some performing, not a lot of stuff, but
right. I
write about my life. So it was the George and Sally show at our house all the time. I did a lot of TV, and I had some movie deals and development deals that's what we call them in Hollywood when they don't actually turn into anything. They give you money to go home.
We have a friend, a makeup artist, who turned into an actor, and he's made more money from stuff that he didn't make than the movies that he has made. It's an amazing world we live in. Your book shows a side of George that people didn't often see. I think people who, especially in his latter years when he kind of turned up the heat in some of his delivery, they might not have seen this man who was very compassionate. And I think if you look at the artist, and even though he was coming through as the angry spokesman for a generation, I think the compassion came through the anger.
Yeah, I think it did. To me, it was obvious, but then I knew him a little better. But I also think that he did have. We called that side of him Mr. Emphatic. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He did have that side where he could make his point and try and drive it home. And one time he said to me, I don't necessarily have to believe my own rhetoric. I just have to pose the question. And I think he's just trying to expand people's thinking, try and make certain points by exaggeration. So that's another technique that a comedian has. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily angry.
I've seen his comedy about God and about the afterlife and about the hereafter and ideas about that. I've also heard him be interviewed on George Nuri's program. I think George was more speculative than he was adamant about his beliefs in that situation. Am I correct in that assumption?
I think he was, because he had a way of transcending, the political world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a testament to how great his audience was. I mean, he had an adamant political point of view, for example.
Right.
And it was always surprising to me that he could see what was coming down the road long before it happened, like this economic meltdown. That's why he was always saying everything was a racket, business was a racket, the economy was a racket, you have no rights, all the corporate powers that be, it's a business, so screw the government, screw the country, screw the politicians. He was able to relate to both sides, I think.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with the fact that some people think that some people have called him dark at a certain time when he's, had his more aggressive stuff. But
right.
When it was really working in front of an audience, it was hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
So it was done for the sake of humor, ultimately.
Ultimately it was, but I think he took a template that someone he admired, Lenny Bruce, and took it to an area that he just exploded what that template had set forth, and he really showed us the absolute hypocrisy that we all have in our lives,
Right.
Here was a guy who, I'm sure George enjoyed the amount of money he made in his career, but I was wondering if indeed he had some frustrations, because I read the book Last Words, and it seemed that George, while he was obviously an icon and people knew him, he stayed on the fringes of breakthrough, if that's accurate.
Well, he sort of has a boutique cult-like following. That's what I've found.
Right.
And I think unless you do something these days, like, if you're a movie star or whatever, but George almost developed his own genre of who he was. I mean, he created his own category, and it lasted throughout his whole life. It lasted his entire life, and it was his own style, and very few people fit into that kind of category.
Right. He did. He created his own universe, and for people who followed his career, like I did, I was introduced to Wonderful Wino by my mother, and seeing him on the, and then he was constantly reinventing himself, constantly challenging himself as an artist, and it's really a rich history. I want to talk about how you think George would like to have been remembered. Well,
I think that he would like to be remembered as someone who changed people's thinking. I think that he was funny, and to me, he wants to be remembered as someone who's funny and romantic and adorable. And I just think that he is remembered as someone who changed a lot of lives. I was actually sitting in a restaurant last night, and 3 women in their 80s were talking to me about how they loved George Carlin. And I just kind of burst into tears, because he had this whole range of fans, from 15-year-olds that I hear from, and 80-year-olds. And they all have one thing in common, which is that George changed the way that they think about the world. And they are more able to think for themselves now. So I think that's... I don't think he necessarily wanted us to think like he did. I think that he really wants people to think for themselves. And
right.
That's kind of what he stood for.
And he always did.
For example, he liked the show The Gilmore Girls.
Okay.
And the reason why I could tell this, he never said outright, well, I like The Gilmore Girls, but he'd finish up what he was working on, he'd turn the TV off, he'd look at his watch, and he'd say, well, time for The Gilmore Girls. But he also knew I liked it, too.
Yeah.
So he was trying to please me as well, but he was just a goofy, romantic, funny guy.
Yeah.
And he would, in a George Carlin kind of way. For example, in the middle of the night, he'd say something like, I need to blow a big fart, and then I'll be right back.
Well,
not many guys will tell you that.
Right.
It's rare. And then he'd come back and he'd say, did you miss me?
Did you think that Last Words was an accurate representation of his life?
I think it was a fair representation, of what we could read about him while he's, no longer here.
Yeah.
So
He didn't really run in Hollywood circles. There's some really great stories in that book about how awkward he felt around celebrities acting like celebrities, you know?
Yes. We were in New York once, and we had very few celebrity friends.
Yeah.
And we passed by George Hamilton, and Carlin was on the left of me, and George Hamilton was coming at us, and without looking at each other, without any eye contact, they said, "Hi, George. Hi, George," and then just kept walking. This is really odd.
Yeah. That is bizarre. And of all the Hollywood people to run into, of course.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, the book is the George Carlin Letters, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade. Towards the end of his life, did he know that he was ill, or was it all a shock?
No, he pretty much knew. He wasn't sharing everything that he knew with me.
Yeah.
And I had seen him, go through various heart operations before, so I didn't know that it was as serious as it was. So it was more of a shock to me, but he knew on some level, and he suspected it on others because I think I mentioned in the book that when I got home from the hospital after he died, the title of the book was a note that he had written me that was propped by my computer, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, and scrolling across the screen were the words, "I love you, I love you, I love you," and all the music that he'd given me was up on his screen. So I'm sure that he knew before he went into the hospital, and he had been slowing down for a couple of weeks. Mm. And I noticed that it was just hard for him to move. But he was going to the hospital to try and fix those things. It wasn't as if he had a heart attack and then I took him to the hospital. He was going to the hospital anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I think he was preparing to do some things.
Yeah.
And I know he wanted to write a comic novel, for example. And I think that was even the name of it, comic novel. But but we had a fantasy of either, staying home and just writing at some point, or he had an idea for a Broadway show as well. And,
yeah.
And I did too. And, so we also thought of doing something like that in New York, but I really think that he wanted to do more writing in a different genre.
Yeah. Yeah, well, touring gets tough. He was a road warrior. There's no doubt about it. He was on the road a lot.
Yeah, he was. He was used to it, I mean, it was difficult. You go to a city, and then sometimes, even though you have a show that night, you get in an airplane and travel, be where you're going to be the next day. And so some of those trips were pretty rough.
Yeah. Any weird encounters with fans over the years that you can recall?
Weird? Yeah, several of those. We were in Atlantic City one day, and a cab driver was driving us around and found out that his name was George Carlin. And he called his girlfriend and had George say hello to her, and he thought it was okay if George would ask her out for a date. And, I was sitting there with George. It was, as if I wasn't there almost. So it was just, it was kind of odd. Guys really, they'd sort of defer to him in a way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they can all relate to him.
By the way, George swore he slept through that incident when we got back from the trip. He didn't remember it at all.
You have really given us, Carlin fans, something great to enjoy. This is a personal, intimate look at a relationship of love and fun and hysterical comedy and some great romance. It's a love story. The George Carlin Letters, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade. It's out now. It's a beautiful book. Congratulations on a beautiful piece of work.
Oh, thank you. And I do have an author page.
Yes.
By the same name of the book.
Yeah, I just went and Facebooked it. So
great.
It's the George Carlin Letters, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade. If you type in the George Carlin Letters, it'll come up. Like the book, read the book, buy the book, and enjoy the book. It's really amazing. Yeah,
and occasionally I post things that didn't fit in the book. So it's at times a pretty active site. This phone, I'm going to get it. There's something about cell phones.
Oh, yeah, they're intrusive.
Yes, that irritate you at all the wrong moments.
Is the permanent courtship of Sally Wade still continuing on?
Yes, I think so. And, the way we designed our relationship, we both believed that it would last forever. I mean, there's evidence of that throughout the book. And, I felt like while I was writing this, he was here right beside me. And this was actually something for us to do together, because I would do some of the writing and then a card would appear or a note would appear to illustrate what I was saying. And I think, there's a chapter in there about our ongoing communications, and I sense his presence a lot. I mean, I don't sense it so much if I'm shopping for groceries at Whole Foods, but if I'm ready to take a shower, whatever.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your life with us, and continued success with this great book.
Thank you.
Sally Wade with us, the George Carlin Letters, The Permanent Courtship of Sally Wade. Get it today. Kelly Carlin McCall. And Kelly is the daughter of George Carlin. There's a great new book. It's called George Carlin's Last Words. This is actually like an autobiography. It's been put together by hours and hours of tapes that Tony Hendra from National Lampoon had collected. And George and he put this book together. And it was intended, I guess, to be published, and George left us last year too soon. We have his daughter, Kelly, with us. Hello, Kelly.
Hello.
Great to have you on with us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I spent the weekend reading this book, and let me just give you my real quick growing up with George Carlin. Every time I hear George Carlin, every time I see George Carlin, I'm reminded of my late mother, because she just loved this guy, and she introduced me to him at a young age, watching him on the Carson show, and then subsequently, I snuck Class Clown into my bedroom, listening to that. George Carlin was a rite of passage for a lot of people.
Absolutely, and I get so much from people how it is this cross-generational thing that moms will introduce you, or dads will take you down in the basement and play the album and tell you not to tell your mom.
Right.
It's a really cool thing when I hear about that.
It's a great book for anybody who wants to kind of see how hard it is to continue to reinvent yourself, because we all know George Carlin is a funny guy, but behind the scenes there was a lot of mistakes, a lot of missteps, both in his private and his professional life. I was really impressed with your father's ability to address adversities in his life and press on.
Absolutely, and I think that is one of the greatest things about this book, is you really do see, because when we look at someone up, on a stage or in the movies or whatever, it looks like this seamless career. It looks like this great, easy ride, and he did. He was, he's like the rest of us. He had a real human bumpy ride, and this book is unflinchingly honest, and he really lets it all show, and talks all about it, and really comes to terms with what it meant in his own life. The drugs and the money issues, and and his own struggle with his career and what he wanted to do, and it's I even found it fascinating, and I know the guy.
Right.
Well, it was at a very young age. It's one of those things where it's just what your dad does, so I guess you don't really know that it's not normal in some ways. I remember being very young and watching him on television and getting to stay up late one night. I think he was like on Della Reese show or something, and that was like an exciting thing to see Daddy on TV. But it wasn't, it didn't like click or anything. But I know when I was older and we would go around, especially when his changes happened and he was doing a lot of colleges in the early 70s, he was like a god, during those times. And so it was really interesting. During the summer, we would all travel together and to kind of watch how people treated him. And I think that's when I started getting, he's kind of special and does something kind of interesting, not like the other daddies do.
Right. And you talk about the evolution of a career. In the book, Last Words, you'll see George Carlin go from the character-driven kind of stand-up, Catskills almost style to the hippie style to the angrier, edgier latter days. It's really a fascinating read. George Carlin's Last Words, and we have them, and they're a gift to his fans. You had the unenviable position, and we talked about how unflinching the book is, of being a very young child who worked to get her parents off of alcohol and drug addiction.
Yeah, it was, it was a crazy time back then because no one really knew what was going on with all this, freedom and drugs and alcohol. I mean, the culture was kind of thrown into it, and as the people were, and I think we were a pretty typical, family that was wrestling with these kind of things, and being an only child, and at times the only sane person in the house. It seemed like the same thing to do was, well, if this makes you guys crazy, then why don't you stop doing it?
Kids often have a way of, keeping things in perspective.
Yeah, perfectly logical to me, but of course I wasn't wrapped up in the middle of the, the chemical experiments, I like to call it,
Okay.
Yeah, and so it was a tough time because, you want your parents to be your parents, and instead my parents were acting like crazy teenagers.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a great story in the book also. I want to go through the book a little bit with people. I really can't recommend this enough. Last Words, George Carlin. When you first read this book, Tony Hendra had compiled these tapes. Is that what I'm led to believe here?
Yes, absolutely. And he had actually worked on the book with my father over 15 years, compiling the tapes, writing the stuff out, shaping the different chunks, and my dad had seen a lot of it.
So there had to be a bunch of surprises for you, like you touched upon earlier.
Absolutely. Although I knew most of the highlighted kind of bigger iconic stories from his childhood, the opening chapter with his dad and his feelings around his dad, that was probably immediately the most touching thing to me, because it really showed my dad's big sentimental heart. And then all the Air Force stuff I knew nothing about, so that was really fun to learn about, and some of the Jack Burns stuff, and just little stuff, and of course the stuff that he was struggling with internally, during many of the times where he knew it was time to evolve again and to move forward as an artist. And I'm a writer and a performer myself, and so for me it was like, oh, wow, yeah, whenever you read someone else's journey, it always helps your own journey. So there are a lot of little things in there that are surprising, and some were harder to read and more difficult and more poignant for me, certainly.
And your dad obviously had incredibly insightful and hilarious observations into human nature. As I read the book, I laughed a lot. I got angry a few times, I cheered his bluntness and his honesty. The second to last chapter, it's called Being, Doing, Getting, because it kind of stands on its own in the book. Yes. And yes. I was stunned, and I had to reread it immediately because his philosophy and view of our role in the universe is so poetic. And so poignant, and I was stunned. I was like choked up. I had to read it again. It was that good. That should be required reading for everybody. That chapter alone, whether or not you're a Carlin fan or not, every school should have Being, Doing, Getting posted up somewhere. Great stuff.
I agree, and for me personally, that chapter holds a section there where he talks about the difficulty of what he chose to do for a living and how it exacted a toll on his life, and there's a section there that was very touching for me because it was almost like a conversation my dad and I had kind of over the years about that, and it was basically about time and being able to spend time with him. And there was like almost a feeling of like a mea culpa in there, and it was very touching for me because I felt like I finally got to have the big conversation with him.
Yeah, we all hope to have that with our loved ones.
Yep.
In life. You have to be getting people climbing out of the woodwork talking to you about this book.
Absolutely. It's really had a great impact, and been talking to lots of people about it, and fans have found me on Facebook, and I've created a little group on Facebook, and it's a phenomenal thing. And people who are George Carlin fans are usually rabid George Carlin fans. And so this book, before it came out, I was so excited because I knew it was going to be such a treasure for them. Because it is the man behind the curtain.
Right. When I first heard that it was coming out, that there's a new George Carlin book coming out, I had read his previous three, Name Palm and Silly Putty and Brain Droppings, and they were humorous and they were great, and it was always great to get new Carlin stuff. But then when I found out it was going to be an autobiography, I was really excited, and I have to say that the book really came through for me. Can I ask a personal question?
Of course.
What was George's memorial service like?
It was smallish, as small as we could keep it, and I created a group of people that personal and professional people who I thought needed to be there. I was the MC, and one of the first things I did was I went up there and I did a little Carlin-esque thing about the words and things we will not be saying today, which is my father did not pass away and we did not lose him. You know,
right,
so I did some of that. So there was a lot of laughter, and we showed some videos, and there was a lot of tears, and you know, it was one of those events where you kind of just throw things together, and it stuck together beautifully. Yeah.
He would love that. He would love that. George's humor, you know, especially in the last decade or so of his career, evolved, like we talked about. It's kind of an angrier, edgier, shouting at the world. And he stated in the book that seeing Sam Kinison do his thing kind of planted that seed, kind of set him upon that change to go down the path where, you know, you really get raw and just, you know, kind of like their primal scream therapy of humor. Do you remember any other comics that George enjoyed that you can recall?
He liked lots of guys, you know, and the thing is like I wasn't always around him when he was discovering these new guys or watching them, but I know he would pick up the phone a lot if he'd see some guy on TV on Comedy Central or one of the, you know, Letterman or Leno. But you know, I certainly know that Louis Black was someone that he picked up the phone to, and you know, really said he really enjoyed his work, and he certainly respected Bill Maher, and then there were lots of other people. I mean, you know, Bill Hicks, of course, and guys like that. But I don't know in particular his list,
because he comes across as a fan as well, and I think that I really enjoyed that part of him. That he, you know, not only was he the elder statesperson and the last of his generation, but he was still a fan of great comedy, and I think that comes across in the book as he mentions people. And I wanted to touch upon that. There's a great story in the book where he goes to an awards ceremony that he attends with Lorne Michaels, Chevy Chase, Dennis Miller, Martin Short, and Steve Martin. And he talks about the shallowness of these celebrity things, you know, these get-togethers, and he attempts to make some sort of human contact with these big names, and he's one of them. And I'm guessing maybe a lot of his friends weren't celebrities, that he hung out with regular guys.
You know, he did, and he didn't actually have a lot of friends. He was very much a loner, absolutely a loner. I mean, he talks about it in the book. And he did his work, and he had, when my mom was alive, he had my mom, and he had Sally afterwards, and you know, it was just a very small life. He was on the road a lot, but he was still in contact with all of his friends from the old neighborhood, and you know, in some ways, I think he was really close with them. He was very close with his brother, and certainly Jerry Hamza, but he didn't hang out with. He never hung out with Hollywood people. I mean, there was never a luncheon or a thing or parties or none of that stuff. He just didn't do it. My dad didn't want me to do stand-up at a pretty young age. He said to me, "I forbid you from doing stand-up." and that's not because I'm not funny, because that I certainly am, but that's because it's such a tough life.
Right.
And that very thing he talked about in the book, you know, being on the road a lot, and that's the kind of life you have to have. And those rooms, you know, it's difficult, and he didn't want that for me. He wanted something more stable and different for me, and so I always thought that was very sweet of him to want to protect me from the comedian's life.
Yeah, but the expression, the love of expression and language, that's in your genes. You can't escape that.
No, you can't. My dad used to say an old Irish saying, which is, you know, you don't lick it off the rocks, kid. And it's true.
It's there.
It's just part of who you are, and you know, it's I can't help myself but want to express myself by either speaking or writing my words. Yes.
Excellent.
And it was kind of a difficulty for me because, you know, I did try to have normal jobs.
Right.
I really did try really hard, and you know, and I would find myself in production work, which was, you know, not too normal, but still at times normal, thinking, you know, I'm dying here. So it's, no matter what, it's an artist's life, and it's a tough life. I'm also a life coach and a creative consultant, so I do kind of have a little bit of stability in that way. You know,
you've got a lot of life experience to bring to that.
I do, absolutely, and it's kind of the role I played from day one in my family anyway. You know, It's like let's see, you know, let's let's contain the crisis here, or let's find the road to happiness and peace again, people.
Well, I think in many of the interviews that are included, it's really a Valentine to you and your mother, and many times over. He's very, very blunt, and he's very open, and he's very forward. But beneath all that is big "I love yous."
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's really sweet because people, especially the last 10 years, saw the kind of what you say, the angrier, edgier George Carlin. But that man had the biggest sentimental heart. He really did. He was just a mush ball inside, and I love when that comes out in the book. That you really see his poignant sentimentality.
Your dad made so many people laugh, and he's such a part of all our lives. It's really a pleasure speaking with you. I do appreciate you being part of our show.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Can you leave us with a lesson that maybe George gave to you that you carry with you?
Well, I think it's really believe in yourself and don't be afraid to express yourself. For him, freedom of expression was so essential, and even if it was something he disagreed with that I wanted to express, which, so in some of my stories I talk about our earlier life, he always said to me, you're an artist and I would never ask you to change a word of it. So, just really respecting that if you have an urge to create something, respect that urge.